Ooh, camera guts. In this video, we're going to be exploring a vintage camera, the Kalimar 660. I'm James Fisher, and this is Vintage Illumination Photography. The Kalimar 660 is a single lens reflex camera, or SLR. Single lens reflex means that the shooting lens is also the viewing lens. There's a mirror inside the camera that reflects the image onto a viewing screen for your eye to see. The Kalimar 660 used 120 film and produced images that were 6 by 6 centimeters or 2 1/4 inches square. With a roll of 120 film, you could get 12 photographs. The Kalimar 660 was introduced in 1963. It was an update of the earlier Kalimar Reflex, which was introduced in 1957. Now, the Reflex was actually an update of an earlier Fujita 66 introduced in 1956. While the Fujita camera did have removable lenses, they only offered one lens, the standard 80mm for the camera. Kalimar did introduce other lenses to the system. The main competitors at that time to the Kalimar 660 were the Hasselblad 1000F and the Exacta 66 from 1954. Some unusual trivia about the Kalimar 660 is that parts of it were used to create a prop for a movie in 1977. They were used to create the macro binoculars used by Luke Skywalker in a movie you might have heard of, Star Wars. The interchangeable lenses for the Kalimar 660 were a screw mount design with their own proprietary screw mount pattern. The lenses offered included the standard 80mm lens, a 150mm lens designed for portraiture, and a wide-angle lens, which was 52mm. This 52mm lens was the widest lens available for any 6x6 SLR camera produced in the 1950s. And in fact, there were adapters made to adapt this lens to the Hasselblad 1000F, since Hasselblad didn't offer a lens of this wide of an angle. Let's load a roll of 120 film into the camera. From the counter, the first thing we need to do is push the set lever to reset the camera to 0 frames being exposed. We'll then open up the camera back. The spool of film will go here, go across and across the focal plane shutter and onto the take-up spool here, which is driven by this. Open up the roll of black and white film to trim the tab. A little sharper knife would be better. Trim the tab. Sure this tab is nice. We'll put the film in the spools. Through these slots, the tab goes through these rollers. The tab needs to go into there as deep as it can. The rollers guide the film. And if you notice, there's 2 red dots right here. What we're looking for is a black arrow that'll appear. We line up the arrow with the dots. Close the back of the camera. Push our set lever, then wind the camera till it stops. And we are set on exposure 1 indicated in our dial. I need to interrupt. I'm editing this video right now and there's a couple things that I didn't put in. One is that this Kalimar 660 has been my personal camera since 1976. I was interested in photography and I was doing a lot of stuff with photography, and my dad asked, should we get you a camera? And I had found one, a used Kalimar 660 for sale in our local shopper's guide, and I said sure. And he and I went to the lady's house and we purchased it, or I should say he purchased it for me for $150. Now I looked it up and that's $785 in current US money. I'm amazed that my dad invested that kind of funds in me to continue on to a hobby. And that leads me to something else that I feel is really necessary for me to say. In putting this video together, I got a little sentimental and wanted to show some photographs of my dad and myself together and some of the history that we had. My dad and I had a great time. He was a private pilot. We would pack up the airplane, he and I, with a tent and sleeping bags. We'd fly to the very remote airport all over in northern Michigan. We'd tie the airplane down, we'd pitch a tent under the wing, wander into town, have dinner, we'd sleep out under the stars. My dad and I did a lot of camping. We were in Boy Scouts together. We did canoeing, all kinds of different activities together. There are almost no photographs of my dad and I together. And in fact, I'll throw it on the screen right now. This is the only photograph that I could find of my father and I. This is it. The home movie that I showed earlier, and I'll show a little clip of it now, of me at about 3 years old, 2 or 3 years old, swinging in that swing on the tree in our front yard. I have vivid memories of that, of my dad pushing me on that swing and just laughing and having fun. He's not in that video. Most of you watching, the vast majority of you watching this video are photographers. Take a moment, hand your camera to someone else and make sure that you are included in the photographs. It is so important for memories, for your children, for your family, that you are not only the person creating the memories, but the person in the memories. Do this one thing for your family. Maybe I'm a little nostalgic right now. Today is January 21st as I'm putting this together, and this is going to go out this coming Tuesday. I realized in putting this together that my father passed on January 28th, 29 years ago. So this video is going live a couple days before the anniversary of my dad's passing. So, Dad, this one's for you. Now let's get back to the video. Now that we've explained some of how the camera works and we've loaded film into the Kalimar, let's go out and create some images. But one thing I wanted to point out about this Kalimar camera, and one of the reasons that I stopped using it almost 40 years ago, I kind of tucked it away and haven't used it, is that it's incredibly persnickety. One of the things, and I believe I mentioned it before, is I actually took it to a camera repairman because it wasn't working properly, and we actually decided to remove the mechanism in it that would trigger a strobe because it was a little mechanical connection, and that was helping to drag the shutter a little bit. Well, these problems are still persisting today. Even though I've taken the camera somewhat apart, I've oiled some of the mechanisms, it's cold in Michigan. It's the middle of January and it's about freezing out. It's about 32, 31 degrees outside right now. And that camera had sat in my car for a little bit. It didn't cool down that cold, but I actually stepped out to do the first photograph with it, and I pressed the button and the whole thing froze up. The mirror went up on the camera, locked. I don't even know if the shutter opened or not. We'll find out once we develop the film and see what happened there. But it's was very disappointing. So I had to go back home, go back into the shop, take the focusing screen out of the camera, and trip the shutter again and do some other stuff. So I lost a few exposures by doing all that, but now it's working again. But the workaround I've got, since I figure it was the coldness that did it, I actually warmed up this thing. It's one of those things that you put on if you got a sore neck or sore muscles. You warm it up in the microwave. I warm this up and I've got it in the camera bag right beside the Kalimar camera to help keep it warmer to make sure that shutter fires. So we'll see how we're doing today with that. Port Huron has a number of rivers and waterways, and we have a large amount of train traffic that goes through for commercial purposes. This train track, this is actually a trestle bridge that goes up, and I was hoping that when I drove by it would be up. I thought that'd be a nice photograph, but it's actually down at the moment, which means there's going to be, or just was, some train traffic. I'm not sure. These trains, I don't have access to the schedules that they are, but I've actually set up the tripod. I'm going to put the Kalimar camera on the tripod and we're going to photograph this bridge. Once again, the shutter froze, so I don't think I got an exposure at all. I'm going to have to start carrying a tool with me, I think, so I can continue to trip that shutter, and that'll bring the mirror down. Back to the shop. Well, my hands are really cold from standing out at that bridge and doing that photograph. I did bring the camera just back into the car and took the lens off and was able to stick my finger in the mechanism and push the shutter down so it continue to fire. But it looks like this cold weather is going to really play havoc with how this camera is going to photograph. So I'm not really sure what to do about that. But I did want to give you a little bit of trivia, something that a lot of people who don't live in Michigan aren't aware of. In Michigan, from right about just after Halloween, so right about November 1st, all the way until just about, well, let's say Valentine's Day, right around February 15th, we no longer have golden hour or blue hour in the state of Michigan. We just don't photograph in those times because it just doesn't exist. We kind of have a permanent state that we call gray hour. Basically, the sun doesn't shine in Michigan for those months. That's kind of the way today is too. It's just a gray, overcast day with a lot of wind, pretty cold. My fingers are pretty numb at the moment after standing out there. But I've got the heat on in the van, so we're staying warm. I mean, as long as I have film in the camera anyway, I might as well do a few. When we process the film, either we're going to have a whole bunch of solid black squares where the film was so overexposed it's incredible, or maybe we'll have images. I am taking the time to focus and expose correctly. What I'm doing is I'm using the Sunny 16 rule, and we covered that in an earlier video, and I'll link that video here, but we're going to go ahead and talk about that a little bit. The Sunny 16 rule is simply you take your ASA, or I'm sorry, ISO of the film. In this case, it's an ISO of 200 for the film, and that becomes your shutter speed. In bright sunlight, you're going to photograph at f16. And then through experience, you just learn as things become a little overcast or a little duller or a little darker, you're going to open up that aperture a little bit or slow down your shutter speed a little bit. So I figure I'm a couple of f-stops off of bright sunlight right now. So I'm actually shooting at 1/100th of a second at f11. Where if I was in bright sunny day with the sun coming down, I'd be shooting at a 200th or 250th of a second, the closest thing you have to your ISO of your film, and f16. So in this case, I'm not overexposing. I have increased the exposure by 2 stops. One with an f-stop to f11, and the other by the shutter speed going from 200 to 100. Now we are going to photograph a train trestle bridge that is up. And in fact, this bridge is permanently up. The train tracks have been removed either side, and it's been frozen in this position for, I think, about 50 years now, and has been kind of a controversial item in our community where some people want to tear it down and some people want to preserve it. We've put the wide angle, the 52mm lens on the Kalimar. I'm going to do some handheld shots of this bridge, and then we're going to see, I may get one, I may get many. We'll see if the mirror drops back down. So I said, this has the instant return mirror. That's really the issue that's going on, is the shutter doesn't fully fire, so the mirror stays up. But the shutter, at least on the focal plane, the two cloths do close. So I'm pretty sure that we're still getting a decent film, decent exposure on the film, that we aren't just going to have black images. But again, we'll find that out after we get the film processed, or we're going to process the film together. Once again, I took the photo and the shutter froze up. I'm going to show you what I'm actually doing. We're going to take this thing apart. I'll take the lens off. We can kind of maybe see in there, but the mirror that should be down is still up. So what's going on is the focal plane shutter there in the back isn't fully dropping down. It isn't descending all the way. So if I reach my finger in there and push it down, you can see the mirror now smashed up against my finger, and now the mirror is fully dropped. Because of that, it didn't. There we go. I can wind the camera, and I think we're set to do another frame. I'm going to do one more picture here. I'm going to try to capture some of the seagulls in the air. Once again, that froze, so we're going to do this again. We're going to take the lens off. We're going to push that down a little bit again, and again, watch real close, and you're going to see that mirror hit me right in the finger right there. Put the lens back on. What a pain. My film counter is up to 10 on this, which means I have 10, 11, 12, 3 more frames to expose on this. I'm going to take a couple of photos, maybe just one, of this piling that's right here in the frame. I've put on the 150mm lens, the portrait lens on the camera, so we'll see how that works. And again, we'll have to stick our fingers in the camera guts to get things working. Camera guts. Right there. That's the ticket. Winder up. Try again. Plock, it says. How frustrating. Right there. Book. Back on. Winds come up. But what we're going to do is I'm going to do a little bit of a close-up. We've got this piling with rope right here. We're going to do a little close-up shot, a little blurred background again with the 150mm lens on the Kalimar 660. Just like me, the shutter froze. Let's go get warm. That is nice, some nice hot tea. I need to get back into my office to warm up a little bit after being chilled so much outside by the river. But I thought we'd come back inside before I finished rolling out the film on the Kalimar 660, so you can hear the last bit of the film rolling through, and then we're going to open it up and make sure the film actually did feed through the camera and that everything worked as we hoped. So we've now done our 12th exposure. Feed that through. I think I can feel the film dragging. Got to wind all the way through. It'll be really disappointing if I open this thing up and the film never fed. Alright, well, let's open it up together and we're going to see what we have. And now you have the film. The exposed film is up on the top now. Remember, it rolled from the bottom to the top. It's the top mechanism that turns. So now we have the exposed film. We're going to take it out of the camera. We're going to pull this knob up. I turn it a little bit and it locks in place, otherwise it drops down. I can pull it up, turn a little bit, lock in place. The film, this little spring will push it out right into my hand, and you got to be sure to catch that, because if you don't catch it, the film will actually unravel and unroll, and then you'll have the film will just fall out from this black paper, from the paper backing, and then you'll have the whole roll just exposed to light. And that's not a good thing, especially if you're photographing a wedding. Not that that ever happened to me, where a roll of film squirted out like a pumpkin seed between my fingers and unraveled right in the middle of photographing a wedding. Well, they've changed film in 40 years. This is now a peel apart, not a lick and stick. So we'll do that, let that stick, and that film is now ready to be developed. And after we develop it, we'll be able to see if any images came out. But that is a subject for our next video. Our next video, if enough time has passed, I'm going to link to it right up here. It's actually going to be the developing and finding out what is on this roll of film. Be sure to watch it. Thanks so much for joining me. I'm James Fisher, and this is Vintage Illumination Photography.